For this next video demonstration, I'm going to show you how to add in the remaining columns quickly. I'm not going to go through every step by step, but I'm going to show you how to add in using the repeat command if we can, and just how to generally add them in quickly. So we previously added in the column on grid line A and 1. Now looking on your sheet S2, we have a column on grid line A and 3 that looks like it is identical size. The bottom of base plate elevation is the same, the base plate type is the same, and the top of the column is the same elevation and the same type of connection. So what we can do here is, if we were in our previous command here, we could have repeated that column over here. Another option here is, if you have a column that's already in and you want to copy it, you can put a window around it, and then with your right button for your menu, go to copy members and just do a single copy. Hit OK. Pick the reference point. Your top status line is asking for a reference point. So with my left button, I'm going to hit locate. First of all, I'm going to change my snap point, location point, to intersection construction line. This is important. If you leave it on auto point will pick multiple points. It'll pick the intersection of construction lines. It'll pick the exact point of a member. It's auto means it's many different points it'll pick. So generally the best option is to pick intersection of construction line. That way it'll pick the intersection of the construction lines and at the elevation you are at. Otherwise it could snap to the end of that column and put that column up to the, say, 10 feet up in there, 10 feet down at the screen. So again, use the intersection of construction. That's the most commonly used location icon. So intersection for my first point, I'm going to pick there with my left button locate. And then let's ask for a second point. Again, see on the top of my screen, now it snapped back to auto. I'm going to click on intersection of construction line, so that's the only one point it'll snap to. And that column that I want to repeat is at grid line 3 and A. Left button locate. Confirm copy. It is asking on the button bindings, yes, and it copied it over. So here again, I'm still in that command. If there was another column that was identical, I could copy it again. In this case I can't, so I'm going to hit my right button for return, exit out, and I copied that column over. Now my next column, I'm going to go to my member add here, and now you can see the last member I added was a column, so I do not have to pick my arrow key and pick my column here again. In this case here, that's the active member add, so if I just click on that, it's going to take me into my column add. So next, pick locate here at 1 and B, and the last column I added in was a 10 by 3 by 3/8, and you can see in my model here it's popped in a 10 by 6 by 3/8. I correct myself there, but that's just temporary until I change the size. So here I'm going to say W12 by 50 according to my plans. My bottom elevation is good there. My base plate type is BP2. Click my file cabinet here, BP2. My top elevation, in this case here, if I look at my S4 sheet, my top of my column there I want at 124.0, and my connection type, in this case here, I'm going to leave it as auto standard. There is no cap plate on this one, so auto standard will end the column at 124.0. If there's something framing over the top of it, it would adjust the column for it also. So in my case here, auto standard is the connection I want. Then back to plan view. Again, I said webs on the wide flange members. The web is 0 on the screen if it's horizontal, the x-axis. In this case, we want it horizontal, so we'll go back to 0 rotation, and we will hit OK. Now you can see that column's in there. It is, and be careful when you are trying to pan around and so on. In this case here, I accidentally tried adding another member over top of that member, and that's what this here is saying. So as I was in here, I was trying to pan, and I cannot pan, and that I accidentally hit the middle button to pan, and I'm actually repeating as my button bindings say. So here, that 12 by 50 is in. There are no other 12 by 50s, but generally what you try doing when you're inputting members is input the same type of member, in this case columns, and then try to input the same section size. So if there's one over here and I could repeat it, you'd repeat it. If there's one here, I could repeat it. That's the fastest way to add them in. Otherwise, if you go from this column here saying try following it to this one, to that one, and so on, you may be creating more work for yourself by having to retype in the section sizes. So here, that one's in. The next one here is a different size, so instead of hitting repeat, I'm just going to hit my left button to locate. And this one here is a W14 by 53. My base plate is also the BP2. Again, my 2 is a line item 2 is a BP2. Elevation still got at 995.5. The top of that column, well, let's go to the top of the column. If we go back to S4, framing at elevation B, and then another view would be to look at view 2 at grid line B. That's probably a better view. You can see that top of that column is also at 124 foot 0, and there's no cap plate on it, so we're going to leave that as auto standard. Now, this column here, back on your plan view, it is rotated with the web vertical on the screen. So here we have to rotate this 90, and we'll hit OK. Now you can see here the column came in web vertical on the screen, so at 90 degrees. Okay, next column at B and 3, again different type column, we can't repeat it, so we'll hit left button locate. This is a HSS 6 by 6 by 5/16, and I missed the multiplication. So 6 by 6 by 5/16. In this case here, it's a square column. We're going to rotate it back to 0. It doesn't need to be rotated because it's square, so we're going to leave it at 0. Bottom is at 99.5. The base plate type is a BP3. The top of the column, again, if we look at grid line B as in boy, and if we look at, also we can look at grid line 3. Actually, we do not have an elevation view at 3 for you to reference, so go back to S4 on grid line B. At the intersection on grid line 3, you can see the column is down to the top of the beam, which is down 2.5 from 124. So we're going to go 123 foot 9.5, and in this case here, this column here, there's a bar joist going to be sitting on it, so we want to turn this back to that auto base and cap plate, and we're going to hit OK. So now we got that column in. Then scroll out here a little bit, and then scroll back in here closer to 1 and C, and we're going to do left button locate. That is a W8 by 18. The web of it is vertical, so 90. Elevation 90, 95.5 is typical for all of them, so leave that. Base plate type is a 4. The top of the column, if we look at grid line 1, which is sheet S3, the top of that column, now you can see, only goes up to 112 foot 0. So here's an example of, as you look at S3, the beam runs over the top of the column. Now SDS2 automatically calculates the setback, or how far to drop that column down. So when you put in the top of steel elevation, put in 112 foot 0. And then when SDS2 does the connection framing analysis, it'll recognize that beam frame lower top, it'll drop down the elevation. You'll see this minus dimension and material setback change automatically. It's on auto. So we'll leave that at 112 foot 0. You do not have to calculate that elevation. Auto base and cap, we'll leave that on. And again, SDS2, well, here's a case where you could leave it on auto base and cap or leave it on auto standard. Auto standard, SDS2 is set up for auto standard. Anytime a beam frames over the top of the column, it knows to put a cap plate on there. So we'll leave that on auto standard. And rotation was 90. We'll hit OK. And the last column is the column at 2 and B.7. This is a W8 by 31. 99 5.5 for bottom. Base plate 4 again. This column is also rotated 90, web vertical on the screen. The top of the column here, in this case, if we look at S3, which is your grid line 2 elevation, you can see that column there goes from 99.4 up to 112 foot, but then there's another column above that. Again, the elevation here you want to be the top of your beam elevation, so the top of that beam is at 112 foot 0. And we'll leave it on auto standard. Now we're going to right click here for return to exit all that command. And now as I scroll out, if you go back to your anchor bolt plan, you should have 3 columns on grid line 1, and you can check the rotation. That one's rotated right. On grid line 2, you have 2 columns. They're both rotated with the web vertical. And then on grid line 3, you have a tube column there and a tube column there. Again, the tube column with the longest side vertical. So it's a good idea in your plan view here to check your sizes quick and your rotations. Easy thing to check. And that should end this demonstration on adding the remaining columns.